Again, thank you for having me. I want to acknowledge two of my colleagues with whom this work is now possible. So when I started this, I partnered with Andrew Fletcher, who right now is the Executive Director of Strategic Partnerships at the New York City Department of Ed. But Andrew, at the time when we worked together on this program, he was the Executive Director of Universal Literacy. And Andrew and I go way back. We were in a doctoral program together, sitting next to each other, and we always thought, oh, someday we'll do a project together. And then COVID hit, and we certainly did a project. Also, I want to acknowledge Aaron Croak, this has grown so quickly, so fast, that CUNY brought in a Director of Literacy Initiatives, and Aaron now runs the day-to-day. Because as all of you as professors know, I have a day job, and I could not run this when you see the scale of it. So we'll start with adapting a little bit of New York City wisdom. I started the Reading League with this, and I really, really mean this. I'm adapting this. If I can do this here or there in New York, in the midst of the pandemic, should be in parentheses, you can do this anywhere. This was an absolute, the young kids would call it a hot mess, but we just kept running forward and keeping an eye on the prize, which was, could we better support pre-service teachers? Can they better support striving readers? And the outcome was yes. So I really just hope to leave you motivated to do something of the sort. And maybe you already are, and I'd love to hear from you with what you're doing. So a little about us. I'm a professor at Brooklyn College. I'm the co-founder, so I started this whole thing. And now I am trying to move into the research side. So PI stands for Principal Investigator. I was a former teacher, a former interventionist, and that's really what I do to this day. I'm right back to where I started as a reading interventionist with this work. I was trained as an ed psychologist, or what's buzzy now, reading scientist. My Ph.D. was with Linnea Airy. So I spent 5 years on a fellowship studying and learning as deeply as I could her theories of orthographic mapping and phase theory, and then how we can adapt those in the classrooms. I'm now a professor of education within the CUNY system. I'm a very proud CUNY professor. I really believe in the ethos of CUNY and who we serve. So here I am with one of my grad students. I'm doing a new course this semester on structured literacy. So all of you who mentioned structured literacy, this course is really about a response to COVID and why we need structured literacy more than ever. All of these students are tutoring. I'll talk about some of the other sections that are also tutoring. I'm also a New York City public school mom, and likely the reason I'm a wee bit sick. One of the things that happened during COVID is that my older child, who's now in first grade, she was an emergent reader during COVID. She was just coming into word reading when the pandemic hit. And I fully acknowledge the privilege that I had to teach her how to read when we were at home. And right outside my door, families were all around me who did not have the same privilege. It really struck me, as I'm sure all of us who were living through the pandemic, I was in I live in Brooklyn. I was hit very badly, as you'll see in this presentation. And I'll never forget that feeling, that overwhelming feeling of like, what are all these other parents doing at this moment? So again, I want to acknowledge Erin. She runs the day-to-day and has really helped us scale. Erin's been a CUNY administrator for 15 years. She's done all kinds of really cool projects on workforce development and has done a lot with policy initiatives. She's the mom of 3 kids, and she used Reading Ready with her own kindergartner. And yes, a shout out to the Phillies. Erin is actually outside of Philadelphia. So she works for CUNY, but she's in your backyard. So we wanted to give a shout out there. Teacher education at CUNY, just in case any of you don't know about what our teacher ed programs look like, we have 15 colleges with education programs. There are actually 25 CUNY campuses. So 15 of those have the education programs. Approximately 17,000 students are enrolled in an education program at CUNY. Whenever I see this number, I always think, if you're going to change literacy outcomes for children in New York City, you have to think about CUNY. You have to think about these 17,000 ed students. 68% of the students in the teacher ed programs at CUNY are persons of color. 39% of teacher education graduates of color across New York State come from CUNY. On the right-hand side, just to acclimate you here, you could look at the 2021 descriptive statistics. 32% of our students are white. We always acknowledge that many of these students are students who indicate they are white, but they come from countries where English is not their native language. I have a lot of students who are immigrants from Poland and Ukraine and Russia. Also, and then you can see the breakdown of students who are Hispanic, Black, non-Hispanic, Asian, and Pacific Islander. Okay, so in order to make this happen, I'm going to recommend that you push on 3 levers. Literacy faculty, but I'm biased towards literacy faculty, but I also want to say I've talked with universities around the country, and they have faculty who specialize in like a social studies community outreach program, and they're doing this as part of that course. They're doing tutoring as part of that. I've talked with universities where they're just opening up a new course. They feel so strongly about tutoring right now that their literacy faculty aren't able to do this, but they're going to hire an adjunct to do this in a different way. You have to leverage your partnerships. This is how I got this off the ground. Every network received a phone call, and the generosity of spirit came through. Also, you have to find, obviously, a program that has training for the students. You can't just hand them a binder, and they need support. They need ongoing support with regards to observations and feedback. So background information on the CUNY initiative. Prior to COVID, reading support in New York City was desperately needed, although we weren't as bad as some other parts of the country. So 48% of students in New York City were not reading proficiently. And I hate to say this is actually much better than other parts of New York State. I'm actually from Western New York, and I was just in Buffalo, where the reports of reading proficiency are much lower than this. Private tutoring abounds in New York City. It's this quiet little hush. It may be in your community as well. Private tutors, I don't shame any private tutor, like they're making good money tutoring for families who have the means, whose children have fallen behind. And this has gone on probably since the dawn of education. It's just something that feels, at times it's felt a little icky to talk about. But really, this whole balanced literacy work, it didn't, and I'm sure you listened to Sold a Story, and Emily Hanford talks about this too. And as I was listening, I was like, yep, that's what I talk about all the time. Families had their children in schools with balanced literacy. It wasn't working, so they just hired a private tutor, and they were getting structured literacy on the side. You have to think about all the families without the means to hire these private tutors or an effective tutor in order to move the needle for all students. So I just like to acclimate people to New York City. You all know New York probably very well. We've got the 5 boroughs. We have lots of low performing schools. These are areas marked in purple. A lot of the schools that are low performing are in the Bronx and in Brooklyn. There's also a large pocket in Queens. Of course, this is overlaid with the lowest medium incomes. And Brooklyn College is right in the middle of this area. You see the red pin. I used to live walking distance, and I'm a short train ride from Brooklyn College. So areas hit hardest by COVID, that's the light green. And you can imagine, you saw it on the news, these areas that were already the lowest median income, with the schools that were struggling the most, they had the schools that were closed the longest, that had the highest rates of COVID when we went back in person. They had such a hard time getting up off the ground back out of COVID. They had the highest teacher shortages. They are still grappling with this. Their students have been the hardest hit by this. They are coming back and are still, I'm in and out of these schools, and the schools are really still struggling with how to have students catch up. So I'll take you back in time to the fall of 2020. So I'm a professor of early literacy, and I had these 30 hours of field work that are affiliated with the courses that I teach and oversee. So for any of you professors out there, I oversee the undergrad course in early literacy. I teach the grad course. Now I've opened a new grad course. There are 3 sections of the undergrad course, 2 sections of the grad course, 1 section of the new course. All of these classes have 30 hours of field work. It's a lot of responsibility to make sure that these students have some kind of high quality experience. I just felt like, and our students could not go in and out of Zoom rooms with the DOE teachers. That was not permitted in the fall of 2020. And I just didn't feel like videos were going to cut it. And I didn't really know what else to do. Oh, went the wrong way, sorry. So our coursework was also fully remote. So that was a struggle. they were unable to observe. And there's my point about the videos. And so I was really left thinking, what am I going to do? And I refuse to perpetuate the problem that we have in the field of education, which is that we have teachers who go out into the field and don't know how to teach a child how to read. And this has plagued me since I was a teacher 20 years ago. I didn't know how to teach a child how to read, and I just can't live with perpetuating that. So that's the micro issue. The macro issues were that there's a lack of experience and training for the teacher pool in general. You all know there's a lack of reading science informed courses. In my department, the students get one reading science course. It's my course. So they get one in undergrad, one in grad. And again, I just opened the new course to try and push the needle. They get one course. So that 30 hours is extremely valuable. I can actually double the impact of the course if I do something of very high quality. CUNY students in particular are in need of valuable compensated degree aligned jobs. Our students are not like typical college students that go away to college and live in the dorms. Our students are overwhelmingly students who are working full time and going to school. They often have childcare or family care responsibilities, and they need to get paid while they're going to school. A lot of these students are paying for university on their own as they are working and paying CUNY as they go. There's a very uneven playing field for paid internships in New York City, as you can imagine, for our CUNY students versus the other universities in the city. And so we needed to rethink some things around what we're going to do with our courses. I also wanted to rethink the training model in general. So the typical training model, at least where I have gone to school and where I've been teaching, is that we focus on training pre-service teachers on what to do with whole class instruction. So a lot of times in our university courses in teacher ed, we're focusing on lesson plans for the whole group. We're talking about instructional strategies you would use with whole group. And then we say like, oh, and you would differentiate it this way. That's how I was trained, and that's what we've been doing. Then we'll talk about small group, but usually this requires like specialized, and then we call it like specialized instruction. Oh, you'll become more specialized. You'll get another degree in something. You'll become a literacy expert, a literacy certified teacher or whatnot. And then eventually you get to do the one-on-one, like the precious one-on-one, the most highly specialized work. And that requires some kind of degree. Well, I was thinking, well, what winds up happening here, if you see the red arrows, you pre-service teachers I've been seeing are taking this training in whole class instruction and then trying to force it into the small group work, right? And they're just trying to replicate what was working with your, on grade level students. You're trying to give it to the small group of students who are striving readers. And then I keep going the wrong direction, I'm sorry. And then you try and perpetuate that again in the one-to-one. So it's like this bottom up, we're trying to move these whole group instructional approaches into the one-on-one approach. And my new way of thinking about this is that I like flipped it on its head. And I really think that if we give a foundation of clinical experiential knowledge in a one-on-one setting for these pre-service teachers, they can then attach vast amounts of new information. When we talk to these pre-service teachers about whole class instruction, and this is what you would do and you try these different strategies, I feel that they don't really have enough to anchor that information on. They've never really worked with students in a whole class. They're not running a classroom. And so they might be writing this down in a notebook and we're not quite sure where it's going. And then they show up in the school and it's balanced literacy, and then that's what they're going to do. So I have found that when I have these students in my courses do this one-on-one instruction in this tutoring work, now when I talk in class about systematic and explicit phonics, my students know exactly what I'm talking about. They're using their scope and sequence 3 to 5 times a week. They're executing on it. And now they know how to adapt that to small group. I do have some research on a small group version of one of these tutoring programs. And so after we determine that some of these tutors are expert tutors, we then offer them a small group situation where they can then get paid more to do this in a small group. And then we have asked tutors, are you bringing this into your whole group instruction? And they have told us, yes, they're adapting this into their whole group instruction. So it's taking this really high quality, explicit, systematic instruction and moving it into the whole class arena. And I am pretty confident. I have to be careful. I'm a researcher, so I can't say I have any results on this, but I'm pretty confident that our tutors are going to have a closer eye and know what to do with those striving readers in their whole class when they get there. Okay. So here again, I'm in the fall of 2020. I've rethought these things. And I decided I'm going to totally rethink my fieldwork to maximize the benefit for students in our community whose families can't afford a tutor. And I want to supercharge pre-service teacher clinical experience so that they're truly prepared to meet the needs of the moment. So we have, and here's again my students, I just adore them, so I put them in there twice. This was my twofold mission when we did this in the fall of 2020. I just want to say, and you all may feel this way as a professor, I have a lot of teacher candidates who can write a really good paper, beautiful. And then I see them in the classroom and, I'm not quite sure if, and then there's a lot of coaching that goes along. And I think this is, not uncommon in teacher ed. You can write a great paper, but do you know what to do with the striving reader? I also just want to say that in COVID, I was at a crossroads of how I wanted to spend my career. I was on the cusp of getting tenure. I have a body of research on high frequency words, and I do love that research. But during COVID, again, being in New York City with how COVID impacted my community, I just did not feel fulfilled writing another paper specifically on high frequency words. I really needed to give back to the community. And so I decided to go for reach instead of research. This is something that I've been actually grappling with because as an academic, there's so much pressure to research. I went for reach. I did not have an IRB to research what I was doing. This was just a go as fast as you can towards this mission. And I have to say, for any of you who want to adopt a tutoring program, the research comes back to you. So now we're going into our third year, and now I have IRBs in place, and now I can go look at the historical data. And my line of research is really shifting now towards the impact of this initiative. So I just don't want the academics to think if you do something like this, then you have to give up your research. Okay, so how did we do that? I always say, like, how did we do this? In 2020, 2021, everything was shut down. All the offices were closed. So we just called each other. This is just like my cheeky little slide of like Brooklyn College me called Andrew Fletcher at Universal Literacy. And we just kept calling each other. And we kept calling colleagues, university representatives, DOE representative, funders and whatnot, until we got yeses. We just kept moving forward. We would politely hang up the phone for anyone who said, no, you're crazy, or no, you cannot do this. And we would say, okay, we're going to call someone else because no one should tell you, you can't do this, right? Isn't this what we're all here for? We're trying to train our pre-service teachers to the very best of their ability, give them the very best experiences. And I do feel that as higher ed, we have this obligation to serve the communities that are right around us. And we have these schools that really support us. Like I've been leveraging schools around Brooklyn College for years, placing my students there, asking these schools to host us and all of these different things. And I thought, wow, you know what? Maybe these schools should start saying to me, why don't you train your students and bring them in and do something more impactful than taking notes in the back of the classroom? So everyone really came together on this. And Andrew and I started this, but then I'm going to fast forward a minute here. The second year we went to do this, the University Dean of Education at CUNY, University Dean Ashley Thompson, took this initiative under her wing. And she was able to leverage money from the New York City's mayor's office, which I absolutely think you can do in Philadelphia and the surrounding areas. And we were able to expand quite substantially during the 2021-2022 year. We did this CUNY-wide call to action. So you remember all of those 17,000 CUNY students, right? We put out one email, just one email, and we emailed 15,000 of the students, okay? Not all 17 for whatever reason, but we had 1,200 applicants respond for a paid tutoring position. I only had money at that time. So I had my students in my courses doing this. It was about 180 students that were doing this. And then we got another grant to do this where you could just come and be paid. I only had money for 63 slots. And I had 1,200 CUNY students say, I want to be a part of this. And it wasn't just about the money or the remote work. It was really that these CUNY students feel, the more I talk to them, I'm able to see them when they're at their schools, they really feel that this is their way also to give back to their own community. Overwhelmingly, the CUNY students go to the DOE schools. They have children in the DOE schools or nieces and nephews and whatnot. Okay. So where are we today? So here's just a map. You remember the impacted areas. And here are the participating CUNY campuses. I believe we're in 17. I should have counted this. This changes quite readily because we do this at Brooklyn College, which is the red pin. That's where it's embedded in my courses. Then when we do this CUNY call to action, pre-service teachers come to us from all over CUNY to do this, not as part of coursework, but as a paid internship. And so you can see these, actually 15 or so campuses that have brought us CUNY tutors. It's incredible what has happened. And you can see that they're able to go into the schools and areas that have been impacted in their neighborhoods. And the DOE schools, it's been incredible. We're in 71 DOE, Department of Ed, so 71 schools across New York City. And there's a new New York City tutoring initiative that's about to launch in a month or so. And so we, if it's possible, we'll try and reach even more students. So now it's, what exactly do we do? Okay, so I have a series of tables that are packed with information, and I'm just going to take it slow as I walk you through this because this is really the crux of how we execute on this. So we have two ways we recruit tutors. Well, one isn't recruiting. One is that this is their fieldwork requirement for the course. The other is that they come to us for an internship and they're paid right out of the gate. We prioritize and we recruit all students who are education majors. Of course, there's some other majors that get in there. We've got some children in youth studies, some social work candidates, they get in there. They might be thinking about changing a major, no problem. But overwhelmingly, we are a School of Ed program. So we work with undergrad and graduate students. I also want to say we have a lot of students that come from our community colleges, and those have been incredible partners. I also have 3 other CUNY campuses who are interested in embedding this in their coursework for next semester or next year. So that's another way that we're expanding. Is this required as part of a course? I think you understand now the embedded course it is, the part-time it's not. They're paid. So after the embedded course students, the students in my courses, I wrote the grant so that after they fulfill their 30 hours of field work, which in the next, you'll see how we break that down. After they fulfill that, the grant money kicks in to pay them $20 an hour to continue tutoring that child. The goal is we'd like to get the children to have 40 sessions of tutoring if possible. The hired students are paid the entire way. They're paid for their training and they're paid to execute on the tutoring. The time commitment, my courses, as you heard, have 30 hours of field work. So they do 10 hours of training. It's asynchronous. And then they do 20 tutoring sessions. That's why the grant money is really important to keep them going. They tutor one student. The hired students, they are tutoring 2 to 3 students. They're providing about 40 sessions, and they do about 6 hours per week because this is all high dosage. The programs used, I've been affiliated with the Reading Rescue program for 5 years now. That's a program that's widely used in New York City. And then we use the Reading Ready program. I'll talk about that in a second. The embedded course model students, they tutor 1 student. The hired students, they are obligated to tutor 2 or 3 students, depending on the program that they use. I will say many of our embedded course model students stay on. They take on more students. They come back to us year after year to then serve in an internship capacity, which is awesome. Okay, here's the 2 programs. I really want to emphasize here, and when we were planning this, you can use any programs. I'm not here to promote these programs. I'm here to just tell you these are available. If you're interested in them, and this is how I did it, again, there's other programs that you could use, and I encourage you to explore whatever programs you're interested in. So I wrote Reading Ready actually in the midst of the pandemic because when we were using Reading Rescue, it was very clear that the students were so far behind in first grade that they needed even more explicit, systematic, and decodable text work. And so that is what Reading Ready is. I wrote it as an on-ramp into the other program. So I own Reading Ready. If you're interested in using it in your university courses, just let me know and I can send it to you. So the dosage is always 3 to 5 times a week. If the embedded course model students want to get their field work done faster, they wind up tutoring 5 days a week. The part-time tutors, they can choose their commitment 3, 4, or 5 times a week. Reading Ready is an intervention for first graders. You can use it for kindergartners. I wrote it to be preventative. It's really the type of work that I was doing with my daughter in order to lift her off into word reading. And I would hope every child would get some type of explicit systematic work like this. You can use it with kindergartners, preventative, or as an intervention if you think that's appropriate. You could use it with first graders. We unfortunately, but fortunately, are able to use this with second graders in New York. It's just sad to see how many second graders actually still need this level of intervention. Reading Rescue has always been used with first and second graders. The format is one-on-one. Reading Ready is a 20-minute intervention. Reading Rescue is 30 minutes. You're always going to leave a little extra room for that important social emotional work, that hi, how you doing? How's your brother? All of that good stuff. Research-based, I just wrote Reading Ready. So we're gathering evidence. I'm going into my third year of gathering the evidence for it. Or it's research-based, both are, but the evidence for Ready, I just haven't published on it yet. It's in progress. Reading Rescue has at least 4 research articles. 2 are from my mentor. 1 is from me with my mentor, Lene Airy. Airy has a really strong publication from 2008 on it. And then there's some other research that's been done on Reading Rescue RCTs. So it's on the proven tutoring list of vetted resources from Johns Hopkins. Fee for schools, none. We don't charge the schools anything right now. We have developed high quality asynchronous PD. The Reading Ready asynchronous PD is about 4 to 5 hours. The Reading Rescue asynchronous PD is about 10 to 11 hours. We always meet with our students afterwards to check in and see if they can show us that they can actually do the lesson before we send them off. So you do a little bit of synchronous check-in as well. I built into these with the support of my colleagues who worked on these PDs with me, all different types of checks for understanding. So if you imagine using these with your university students, they're submitting a response, they're answering multiple choice questions, and they have to go back if they didn't answer the question correctly. So you do have all of this oversight while they're doing that asynchronous work. So you understand this part. Reading Ready was written also as a COVID response, and Reading Rescue has the long history. And a little bit about the programs. Reading Ready has 4 parts. You do a little letter sound practice, and then you're doing a lot of phonemic awareness work. You're doing phonics work, where we call it word analysis, word attack. And then students are reading decodable text, decodable sentences. Everything is very tightly controlled. So the sounds that they're practicing in the letter practice for 1 minute are then what they're hearing in the phonemic awareness part. Those are then the sounds and letters that they're working on in the phonics part. Those are then the sounds that we use to build words in the decodable sentence reading part. We have recently mapped some free decodable text to our decodable sentences and so we have that as a free resource you can use too with Reading Ready. After they've practiced the sentences, if you want them to take this, free decodable text home or back into the classroom, you could do that. Reading Rescue has a lot more fluency work going on in it. These are slightly more advanced readers. There is some phonemic awareness, but it's heavier in Ready. There is great explicit systematic phonics work. You're doing magnetic letters. You're doing phoneme graphing mapping, just like you're doing in Reading Ready. You're doing word sorts. You're doing this word building activity. There are decodable passages that you can use as a practice. We have also mapped free decodable text now to the Reading Rescue scope and sequence. But it should be noted that these students during the lesson are reading authentic text. These texts are not FMP. They are much more decodable, much more thoughtfully crafted. We have the decodability levels, but they are not considered decodable text. There's lots of really good fluency work. Because they're authentic text, we're building more juicy vocabulary. The books are fiction and nonfiction. And there's some really nice comprehension work that goes on in 3 parts of the lesson. I'm going to skip this if you have questions about the program, but again, I encourage you can use any programs. Those are what align best to the courses that I teach. So let's get back to some of the logistics here. School coordination. Well, we recruited schools that had low ELA proficiency scores on the state test. The schools also had, which may not be surprising, high economic need indexes. Those have always been the schools that we prioritize for this work. The schools then identify a coordinator. It's often the literacy coach, the literacy specialist, and that person rosters first and second grade striving readers, and they tell us any Acadience data that's available on that student. Lots of the schools are still using leveled readers, so we ask for that, whatever information they're able to give us. And we ask them, what are the ideal times for tutoring this student? And then that person is in charge of managing the schedule. So they do have to make sure the student gets online or gets to the table when tutoring time happens. It's not that much. I want to acknowledge the lift on the school coordinator, but I want to say this is not a massive lift for the school coordinator. The professor, so if you're a professor thinking about doing this, one of the things I've learned to do is to inform students ahead of the semester that this is the fieldwork requirement. Or if you're thinking about using this as a major project, some universities have said, well, we can't do this for fieldwork, but maybe I'm going to get rid of this final project that's a huge paper, that maybe this is more valuable. I would recommend you just let students know ahead of time. I could share the survey I call it a survey of understanding that my students go through. It's a Google form, and it's like, I understand that there's 20 hours of tutoring. Yes. I understand I have to give availability. Yes. I understand this is very different than traveling to a school. Yes, or whatnot. Okay. Now, after we've done this for 2 years, we now have this actually written into the bylines of the course code when students go to register. That's how committed we are to this as the embedded course model. I think I'll be doing this until the end of my career. I just think it's been so great. I do spend time at the beginning of the semester and I map out, okay, I talk about this initiative and the tutoring in the first session when you go over your syllabus. And then I give students from the 2nd to the 5th week of the semester to finish the asynchronous training. Now they're doing the more robust program for me. They're doing the longer program, Reading Rescue. So they have a couple of weeks to get that asynchronous training done. And then they're being paired with a student. So then all I have to make sure is that I have my training modules ready to give them and that I've figured out where the program materials are. I could talk to you a little bit more about that. So you might think, okay, well, how do you do the pairings? The way we do it is that when the students fill out the yes, I understand, they also give us availability. Like roughly what's your availability for a 1-hour slot or a half-hour slot, 3 to 5 times a week. And our students have been so generous. They've said, oh, I'll do this during my lunch break. A lot of our students are working full time. Oh, no problem. I can do this after school. Oh, I can do this in the morning. We have students tell us. It's just been amazing. They just have to give us a consistent time. So that's my recommendation. As I mentioned, the school coordinator gives a time. And then we have a team at CUNY that's doing this now. But if you were to do this, we could help you. And hopefully you're only doing this starting with like 20 students, and then it's not that hard. But you cross-reference and you pair them. You'll learn that, or you'll hear lots of our CUNY students are doing this remotely. So we leverage Zoom. We do provide observations. That's obviously key here. So every tutor is provided a first observation between their 1st and 5th session. We flag anyone who needs extra support and we give a possible second observation. And then everyone gets a final observation between their 15th and 20th session. If the tutors are going on, then they go into the next Fidelity check cycle. But this is just when it's part of my courses. It's key as you grow. I just want to say, so I'm like talking to you about what CUNY does, and also don't want to overwhelm you. Like when you grow, if you do this, you might wind up promoting some of those students who are excellent tutors into a lead instructor role with the grant money you'll receive. These, you're looking at this gorgeous group of proficient tutors who then were promoted to receive $25 an hour to support with Fidelity checks. They help me watch all the videos, and they are the whole reason this thing runs with such high fidelity. We have a checklist for all the programs. And then you'll see 4 of my students are in this. They were grad students who then became lead instructors and then became program managers. It's been wonderful. I'm not going to walk you through this chart. I'm just going to say that at CUNY, we do this both remotely and in person. Obviously, we had to start with this being direct to home during the school day. During the fall of 2020, there was very little school happening. Once schools opened back up, we did offer it during the school day. I'm going to fast forward to where we are now. We are still doing this a lot remotely, and the school tells us, okay, you could do it direct to home, connect with these families. You could do it during the school day, or you could do it in our school building, like remote in during after school. Or a school says, we're only going to do this if you come in person. And so we recruit our part-time hires to do this in person. I will say my embedded course model students, they all do it remotely. And that's also a part of New York City and the complexities of navigating the city. It's just hard to get where you need to be. So here, I just want you to see the vision here. This is an example of remote instruction, a school that I was able to visit. Here's some of the kiddos. They put together a lab. They had the tech ready to go. And these kids were cranking when I went in there. I just could not believe it. One adult was just rotating 5 kids per half hour in and out of this type of tutoring. He said the school has never been able to give this type of one-on-one support. It's been incredible. In-person instruction, I want to show you this. Our summer program, we were able to do a lot of in-person instruction. And here you see again this room that they dedicated to this one-on-one support. And you just kind of see like the tutors leaning in. You see the hug on the right side. These social emotional pieces are coming through. Nothing's better too than seeing the racial, ethnic, linguistic diversity of the CUNY students matching, or it doesn't even have to match. It's just there with the student body that we work with. I often take this for granted as a CUNY professor, but that is a part of the magic of what we do here. And soon I'll be able to do some analyses on that. So I just want to simplify this for any professor that's interested. You could just do a pilot in your course. And I'm talking to a lot of universities, a lot of professors around the country, and they're like, we can't pull off this CUNY thing right now. And I say, yeah, no, you shouldn't try it yet. But just think about how you're doing your field work. Maybe, as I mentioned before, grab those field work hours or replace an assignment, because the tutoring is just so powerful. Use a free program. If you don't have grant money, there's lots of free programs you can use. And again, I mentioned, I'm happy to send you Reading Ready. We have the training and the binder. Nothing would bring me more joy. You can have students track their own progress. So we leverage data sharing agreements between the DOE and CUNY in order to see the student data, and it all lives on a DOE SharePoint account, like Microsoft Teams secured. But you obviously, your students are working with, your university students are working with students anyways, and there's data that they're gathering, I'm sure, for a project or whatnot. It doesn't have to be an elaborate situation. They can just track their tutoring progress. And you could do observations the way you usually would do them. Maybe you are going in and out of schools. Maybe students submit 1 or 2 videos of themselves tutoring. Maybe you have the luxury of an RA or a TA. That would be amazing to do this. Then after you pilot, maybe you then go in the following semester, you could go for the grant money. Maybe you want to go for the grant money right out of the gate. Of course, I'm happy to help in any way. The grant money has been really helpful for hiring these lead instructors and coordinators. Think about those tutors in your class who are awesome and promote them. I'm going to go really quickly through this. And for those of you who saw the presentation, I promise I'll go fast. The first year we did this, we had 182 embedded course students who participated. Remember I told you about those undergrad and grad courses? We hired 93 tutors. We had a total of 275 tutors in like the dark days of COVID. 195 DOE teachers came and supported us and tutored as well, which was just incredible. It still just warms my heart. So we trained 470 tutors. We served 592 students. And I always go back to that dual impact. So pre-service teachers and the kids, 1,000 individuals were impacted. You'll see how we grew. The next year, this was last year, we had 650 CUNY pre-service teachers that did this work. We were able to serve over 1,000 students. So that the plus is like, how much did we grow by? We grew quite quickly, which I think would happen in any city, any large city. And then we've got that twofold mission of our overall impact and what we were able to do. Now, this is our projection. This is what we're really hopeful. This is what we're working every day tirelessly to do. Our goal is to have 800 pre-service teachers. Our goal is to have 2,700 DOE students who are going to work with us this year. Even if we came close to that, I would just be so proud. And I'm so proud of CUNY for letting us do this work, and you'll see our dual impact there. So I just want you, I'm just flashing these, that we keep an eye on the impact of both programs. These are not programs that just go off and we say good luck. We monitor how many sessions, we monitor intervention reading level. I know reading level is not what, as reading scientists, we want to talk about. The schools want us to report this, and we have to acknowledge where schools are. And I'm not here, my mission in this is not to berate schools about reading levels right now. So we do monitor that. We then also use, though, Acadian's data, and we use Amira, which is an artificial intelligence assessment. And we look at the bottom at what is their growth, their area score growth. And that's been really impactful. And then we have practitioner created assessments for reading ready on phoneme segmentation and non-word reading. So it's monitoring. I just want to say that this is a little of the qualitative work here. 99% of the tutors said that they had increased awareness and appreciation for research-based instruction. 97% said they had confidence in teaching foundational literacy skills. 97 said they'd recommend the programs. It would be any program you use, I'm sure. 94 said that they foresee using these strategies or activities in the future when they teach emergent readers. So they're learning all these different types of activities that they can adapt. I do want to acknowledge too, we have 2 programs going on. So we've had tutors now train in the Reading Ready program, and then they move into the next program. So now they've been trained in 2 programs before they go off to teach. And as I get to the end, students have said this made me realize why I chose to study and major in education. I just want to say I was an education major, and by the time I got done, I was really burnt out. I think it's a miracle sometimes I stayed in education. By the end of it, I didn't think it was for me. Another tutor said this was the best summer job. Another tutor said I connected a lot with my students. We shared laughs and completed the work. Another said that the number of skills that I've learned from this experience is invaluable. Thank you for the experience. I can't believe they're thanking us. We're so appreciative for them. They formed a bond with their student. And this tutor said, it made me really proud and happy for her to see her abilities are limitless. So it brings this whole growth mindset. We do this whole social emotional growth mindset. These are striving readers. This is not the child. This is not about the child not being able to read. This is about the instruction they probably have not received. So success despite the odds, this is my favorite slide. We did this when school buildings were closed, limited technology, major teacher shortage, the vaccine mandate in fall of 21, when we thought things were stable, we lost like thousands of teachers across the DOE. At one point, the previous administration told us we could only do this during after school, which was pure chaos. And there was a lack of this evidence-informed programs. But I will say, despite all of that, and that's why I know that you all and any professor in the country could do this, because over the last 2 years, this is not counting this year, we provided a total of over 3,500 free tutoring sessions in research and evidence-based programs to children whose families would not otherwise be able to have a private tutor. Just bringing us back there. I feel very strongly that this should be the norm, that this is what we should be providing to all striving readers across our country if we really want to make a difference and not just keep talking about these NAEP scores. So finally, as I said, if you have that literacy faculty, you're going to consider those fieldwork considerations, or if your university is interested in doing this part-time, you could write grants, leverage every partnership you have. I know you've got great partnerships with schools. Maybe the schools, as I mentioned before, should start requiring this of their university partners. I know that's bold, but if I was a school, I might start doing that if I was a school leader. Community-based organizations are also awesome for this work. If there's a school that's not receptive to it, after-school programs have been great. And find your programs, make sure you all are very savvy, make sure it's something that's research-based, and then consider synchronous and asynchronous trainings and support. I do think when we moved to the asynchronous modules, it made a huge difference for these university students. And then your observations. Couldn't have done this without all the grant work. This has been amazing. The funders have come to us with such a wonderful spirit of generosity. They didn't know me from anyone. They could have thought they were giving a grant to any lady over at CUNY campus. They really believed in the work too, and I'm so grateful. And then I want to mention there's public funds, of course, that you can leverage, which we've been able to do. Thank you very much.
Wow. Katie, that's amazing.
Thanks.
Thank you. Oh my goodness.
That's exactly how I felt the first time I saw this. It was any less impactful. It's just amazing.
Do you think we can, there's some questions people can just raise their hand because we have sort of a big group and ask some questions of Katie. That was so impressive. And it feels so transferable. That's what I think is so exciting. I can see the possibilities in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I can too.
Thank you.
I'll get started and just ask a question about, I was curious about whether there were differences in terms of online tutoring versus in-person tutoring, like in terms of material needs and all that kind of thing, just logistically? Yeah.
Good. So I'm in the process of analyzing the outcome differences, if there are any, between those two. But when
Yeah.
it comes to materials, we wound up building the asynchronous PD so that you can click on whether you're doing this remotely. You just keep on in the module, like you pick that part of the module versus this other part. So it's all baked into the same training. And then for the materials for Ready are really simple. It's just a binder that and then you use like little blocks that you have, or a whiteboard if you have it. For Rescue, there is a box of materials. If you're doing it remotely, you don't need all of these magnetic letters and whatnot, because we built Jamboards. And then the Jamboards have, as you've seen, I'm sure in a million other places, the letter tiles and whatnot. And we built all of the word sorts into these cards that are on another Jamboard screen. So it's a pretty nice and very well laid out Jamboard situation. If you're doing it in person, your kit for Reading Rescue is more elaborate with magnetic letters and whiteboards and things like that.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Julie.
Hi, that was, excuse me, remarkable and amazing. I'm wondering, this may actually be a question for folks who are Philly-based, how Reading Rescue and Reading Ready potentially align with the School District of Philadelphia curricula that are also based in the science of reading. But if we're using something like a Reading Ready to prepare tutors, but schools are using specific curricula to those things, do they have synergy?
Well, I know that the most recent ELA framework that's been newly adopted by the district includes this foundational skill building in their tier 1 instruction. So it's not going to be foreign to them. I don't know. I can't really speak to the intensity. I don't know if anyone else here can talk about the intensity with which this is delivered in tier 1 or tier 2 or even tier 3. But I do know that it was specifically laid out that way in the new ELA. Russell, I don't know if you can give any more context to that.
Repeat the question.
The question is whether Reading Rescue and Reading Ready align with the curriculum focus of the School District of Philadelphia.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
You don't think there's any, going to be any sense of we're using foundations or other curricula and there's a sense that these conflict? I don't think they conflict, but.
No, I mean, let me speak. If they don't conflict, whether somebody might say they conflict, I don't foresee it. I mean, anything's possible, but I don't see that that's a real problem.
So there shouldn't be an issue.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
From my perspective, absolutely not.
Let me ask Katie, university school system funding, which one was the most difficult to bring to the table?
The university, the grant money, like what part of the grant money was the most difficult?
Well, in other words, if we wanted to reach out, are the universities the place where there needs to be, some pressure and encouragement, or the foundation world, or the schools? They all have to be on the same page, and I'm assuming that they're not all embracing.
I think I would actually say the universities are the hardest nut to crack. You have to have that professor that's really sees the vision for this and is willing to maybe just pilot it without asking every layer of support at the university whether you could do it. I'll say in the small group that we have academic autonomy as professors, and this was also something I leveraged. Now, once it went to the level where the university dean was involved and whatnot, of course, there's more parameters and things I can and cannot do and whatnot. But when it comes to my courses, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I believe in, and that's it. And so I think sometimes we just need to get to more professors and help them see that this is possible and that we could help them do this. I think professors are totally overwhelmed and strapped, like, so they're spread so thin with all of the administrative tasks and whatnot they have to do. So if we can find supports, I have found the foundations to be incredibly generous when it comes to this. In fact, they might even be looking for opportunities to spend their money. This is what, like, foundations are almost like, oh my gosh, you're doing early literacy in this way. And you always talk to the funders about the dual impact. As a lot of funders now are like, I don't want to just fund the kids. I want to fund the teachers who are going to be the ones impacting the kids. And so the dual impact has gone really far. So
I want to say that your list of foundations on your last slide, there were a lot of them and very high profile. So that's very, very impressive that they come to the table. It's very accessible as an intervention, right? It has to.
They were amazing. And I should clarify too, the Heckscher Foundation was the first one to come to the table. And actually the Benedict Silverman Foundation, they own Reading Rescue. So once the Benedict Silverman Foundation, they were of course thrilled about this, but it's amazing to see that another foundation was the first one to write the big grant. And then those two foundations were in on this. And then the other foundations were like, oh, wait, I kind of want, and they've all just been so amazing and increasing their support over the years. And now there's this larger tutoring initiative that'll happen across New York City for this, which is going to be so wonderful for the students. One thing I want to add, though, is the university professors have access to all of these ripe tutors. And one of the problems with the tutoring community right now, there's two problems I see, and I hope I'm not speaking too much, but I'll just go for it right now. One is that sometimes the tutoring conversation is being run by people who are not literacy experts, not science of reading trained people. And the other thing is that there's a lack of tutors, or they're tutors that you're going to have this revolving door of tutors. And, to have these pre-service teachers so committed to these kids, and then they go on into the next program or they get a job at that school or whatnot, just makes a huge difference. So the university professors are sitting in a really unique position right now as experts in the field and who could research these programs, and they have access to students, tutors.
Yeah, and the third issue is just resources, families that can't afford that. Yeah. Did you have to facilitate new partnerships between the university and schools? I mean, it sounds like you already had existing partnerships for field placement arrangements with folks. And can you talk a little bit about that, about expanding your partnerships?
Sure. We did have to start new partnerships because it was COVID, and so many of the schools, there's a few schools who we had relationships with that of course said, yes, come on in. But we had so many tutors, we needed more than the partnerships that I had. And really my partner, Andrew Fletcher, was key in this. He was at the DOE and he helped so much with school recruitment. And he looked at those ELA scores and ENIs, and he tiered his outreach. And he said, okay, these are the schools with the lowest ELA scores. We're going to reach out to those schools first. And they have this number of weeks to get back to us, and we'll do info sessions. And then the next tier, and then the next tier up. And of course, there's schools that are in the bottom tier that they didn't want tutoring, they had their own tutoring, whatever it was. So the schools have been amazing. They've been incredible. When you go to these schools and you see their commitment to the tutoring, they've got their schedule up, they've got their coordinator. I was in a school where they had dedicated like an assistant teacher just to going and retrieving the students, putting them where they needed to be and whatnot. So it depends. We have some schools that have 40 students getting tutored. We have other schools that have 5, so that's also in New York, of course, you can have that kind of variability. It works.
Katie, did you have any buy-in or point of contact from the DOE at the top? Or is this school by school, like elementary school by elementary school?
More elementary school by elementary school. Yep.
Okay.
That's such an interesting point you're making, because I connected with Andrew, who is at DOE Central. Our first go at this was actually to go to the superintendents. And so we targeted superintendents who were so excited, superintendents in Brooklyn, because first this was just a Brooklyn College initiative, we targeted 2 superintendents that oversee tons of schools, as you can imagine, in New York. The superintendent said, yes, we're totally in. And then it was crickets, right? Because as we know, things like this work if the school wants it, if the school leadership wants it, if the school coordinator is willing to do the work and whatnot. And so it really needs to be at the school level. They are everything when it comes to rostering the students and getting this off the ground.
So principals, did you have, yeah.
Principals were key. We sometimes it's the principal who drives it, and other times it's a parent coordinator who caught wind of this, or it's the reading coach that got wind of this, and then they drive it with the principal approval. So the principal will hear that person will say, I'm going to do this if you're okay with it. And the principal says, yes, of course. I don't have the capacity to help you. And that person says, no problem, just go. But it's all within that school. It's either top down or bottom up at that school, but always at the school level.
Yeah. Interesting.
Fantastic. I think, Katie, we've kept you for over an hour. This has been tremendously informative and exciting and invigorating. And thank you so much. We do have it recorded, and we're going to make it available to not only everybody who was here, but anybody in the Read by Fourth world that wants to hear you and learn more about the Reading Corps. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate the time. Thanks so much. Take care.